Welcome to our video. I'm Marshall Shannon, a ministry design coach with Ministry Design Concepts. In this video, we're going to talk about the rules for implementation. If you have gone and taken the time to develop a strategic plan and follow the 4 steps that are on the screen in front of you, where you take the time to discover things about your congregation and your community and their connectivity, along with a number of other bits of information helpful to developing a game plan for your church, then you move from that to design your strategic plan, and then you want to implement it. It's here with the delivery and the direction of your strategic plan that I want to share with you what I think are 3 valuable rules or lessons that you are to follow and carry out in order to help the implementation go well. What good does it do to do all the homework, pull together a strategic planning team to design and put together your game plan, implement it, and then not give direction to it? Well, you want to make certain that you implement what you have designed, but then you've got to manage and monitor it. And so as we look at the implementation, here are 3 rules. The first rule is measure everything. Measure everything. Every church must be convinced in their own mind that it is more important to track measurable outcomes than it is to check off the completion of activities. Just because you had a food pantry every Tuesday for 20 years and you went through the motions with your staff, both paid, volunteer ministry leaders, volunteer workers, and you carried out the steps all the way through it, doesn't mean that you had the outcomes that you wanted to have happen. You completed the activities on that Tuesday for 90 minutes, or your children's ministry, and you go through all the steps. You're always recruiting workers. You go through all the busy activities of putting together your children's ministry, but you've never stopped and looked at how effective is our program or project, event, or activity. Secondly, you really can't improve what you do not measure. Focus on outcomes, not outputs. Let me give you this comparison. I grew up playing baseball. My dad coached. As I grew up, my sons played baseball, and I coached. We could count the number of pitches that I threw as a pitcher, number of strikeouts, number of hits I got at the plate, what my batting average was, but the outcome that we all wanted at the end of the season was to hold the trophy up that we won the championship. That's what I mean by an outcome. You play the game, you get the 3 outs per inning, you run the bases, you field the ball, you throw the ball. You tag the runner out at the plate or on one of the bases. You swing the bat. You had your at-bat. But all those are activities that, yes, can be measured as to your performance, but what you better be concerned about is the outcome. And if you understand, as I do, that as a church, your mission is the Great Commission, then you better set up your programs, projects, events, activities, or whatever you're calling them, so that you can measure the outcomes, not just the outputs, the activity. Look at the achievements. Is that clear enough for you? If not, pause the video, scroll down, and type in a question. Say, Marshall, I don't understand the difference here. And I'll email you and give you an answer. And we try to support you as you take these videos. So there's interaction in order to help you think through it. We may need to put it to you a different way. Here's the next thing. Focus on effectiveness, not productivity. Listen, you may be like me where I get all these emails every day. And when I've addressed every email, I might have been productive in getting through 100 emails in that day, but not been effective to carry out the purpose by which I am looking at the emails. And that is to strengthen leaders and through encouragement and equipping them so they can lead turnaround churches. And so you need to focus on effectiveness, not just productivity. And then stop measuring activity and instead measure accomplishments. If what you're measuring your whole ministry by is whether or not you make disciples that in turn make disciples, then that's the ultimate measure that you're having. You may record and measure everything else. And again, back to baseball, it's all about the numbers. How many wins a pitcher got, how many hits a player got, what the batting average was, the slugging average was, how many errors they made in the field, how many bases they stole, how many times they scored during a game. All of those can be measured, but you've got to decide what the bottom line is. What is the key accomplishment that you want to happen in your ministry? And if you want that to happen, you need to set it up where you can measure it. So as we continue talking about rule number 1, measure everything, the ministry challenge when trying to determine how to measure is to answer the following 5 questions. You've got to decide who you're going to measure, what you're going to measure, and how you're going to measure it, where you're going to measure, and when. And then why. You've got to decide that. I can't decide that for you. You're not under my authority. You're under God's authority in your congregation and maybe a denomination that you submit to and submit your leadership to. But every church has got to really decide how they're going to measure the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how of this. So if you're going to measure everything, everyone needs to be on board and take ownership of their part in this, whether they're doing the measuring or the one being measured, that you want to make certain that you've done this decently and in order. Here's one caution. And the caution is, because you're going to probably have people argue with you about, we don't need to measure, this is the Lord's work, it's eternal work, and we'll never know the full extent of our ministry until we're in heaven, and all of this is over with, and on the arguments go. And I'm telling you that for church, nonprofits, and businesses, any group of people, organization, that gets together to accomplish a mission needs to measure what they are doing. And so they argue this. Well, how are we going to measure how satisfied the people were with the food pantry ministry or the children's ministry? Isn't that awful subjective? Can we make it objective? And here's one caution. I know you want precision in being able to measure, but sometimes the greatest win you can have is reducing ambiguity. In other words, the unknown, to say, well, we're not quite sure what the results were when we measured it. Don't be afraid to measure your ministry and the performance so you can adapt and adjust and be able to move your ministry forward, because you can't get a precise result where you can say, here's the concrete result of that effort, because so much in ministry is not objective but is subjective. And so I just wanted to put it out there. It's better for you to measure and reduce the ambiguity of the situation, of the result, than just chunk it all together and not measure it, because what you don't measure, you're not going to improve. Here's the second duty. Assign duties. The second rule for implementation of your strategic plan is to make certain that you assign duties. Every church needs to be willing to assign every task to a person. Here are some rules for making assignments. Give the assignment to an individual. Secondly, make firm due dates. Just to say, in the month of August, we want you to have a solution to the following problem. Is that August 1st, August 15th, August 30th? What is the problem? What might some of the solutions be? And so you want to establish clear deliverables. Who's going to do the work? When are they to have it done by? And what are they supposed to do? So make certain everyone knows the specifics about what has to be accomplished and when. The less concise and clear you are about the task, the assignment, the more foggy it is in the minds of the people who are trying to carry out that ministry task. So make certain everyone knows the particulars about what has to be accomplished and when. So the who, the what, and the when needs to be assigned with every task. Rule number 2, as we go through this, assigning duties, giving individual assignments instead of team assignments will aid the development of a culture of accountability. Let me explain my concern here. If you give a team, and you're going to have to sort through this yourself, but you give a group of 5 to 7, and I've worked with building committees of 22, which is way too many. 3, 5, and 7, at the most 7 on a committee or on a team. And as this team is given the assignment, someone, an individual, has got to be responsible for the outcome, the achievement, whether they overachieve, achieve, or underachieve the assignment. Because if you don't, everyone else is going to point their finger at everyone else saying, well, they didn't do their part, or they did this, or we thought they were going to do that. There has to be a leader of that team who is given the responsibility to oversee the task, and they are held accountable for the outcome. So as you continue helping people, you want to help those people in your church through assigning individual tasks. Help your congregation as they involve themselves in your ministry to take ownership of their assignments. Help people realize that they must give an account for their performance. If you were in the business world, I would tell you to give individual assignments, make them accountable publicly, post the results of the task, the project, the program, the event or activity that you're doing in the business world, so that everybody can see. And make sure there is only one person accountable for any assignment, so there's no squirming out of it. And they know that if it's going to get done, the ball's in their court, and they've got to make it happen. And when they're required to be accountable, and make everyone be transparent about the way you report it, you'll get more done. You don't want your game plan that you've gone through the discovery phase and the design phase, and now you're implementing the thing, and nothing happens because you fell on the implementation. Talking with other coaches, ministry coaches, it's the failure on the implementation that often is the downfall of our ministries, and it's probably why there's 85% of our churches in North America that are either plateaued or declining. Here's the third rule. The third rule is to monitor performance. So you have set this up to measure everything, to assign responsibility, duties to a person, and now you're going to monitor how they perform. Every church should work as a team to provide each ministry leader with all of the planning and offer regular updates on implementation and performance. Why? Because your ministries need to be orchestrated, coordinated. They need to be in alignment, in agreement, in one accord. They need to be functioning together. Some years ago, I think 2006, Tom Rainer's research group wrote the book Simple Church from their research, where they found that larger ministry guide, that the individual ministries within that church worked in a silo, individual silos. In the children's ministry, for the 4 and 5-year-olds, didn't know what the first and second graders ministry were doing, or to the teens, or so forth, and they may have all ended up having their own mission, their own vision, operating by their own core values, and they weren't productive. And so to simplify things, you bring everybody under one roof, remove the silos, and you want them to work together. This provides each ministry leader with the opportunity to monitor their performance so they can adapt and adjust. So you want an open, transparent culture of accountability where you're going to monitor how people are performing, and you're going to let everybody else see what's happening here, and you're just going to die to self, take up your cross, and follow Christ when it comes to monitoring and measuring your ministry and the ministry of everyone else. You'll get better results. This should help focus everyone on getting results instead of just getting things done. I'm a big checklist guy, and I'll have a checklist. I've got one in front of me right here that goes through, and you check off the duties as you get them done. Well, when it comes to this, people can think, well, I've checked off the list, but they have not accomplished the key major things. And so you don't want to marry your get things done. You want to marry your mission and understand what you're trying to accomplish. And you want to make certain that you measure everything and assign duties, and then monitor what is happening so you can tell people what the results were. The focus is not only on faithful performance of the duties. You taught Sunday school for 45 years. But the focus is on the results that will come from being faithful. Just because you did something over and over and over again and checked it off your list doesn't mean that it's been productive, doesn't mean that it's been effective, doesn't mean that lives have been changed and people have been helped for eternity. And so as you go through this, you want to, now let me just give you several suggestions to improve performance as you monitor it. Number one, create scorecards for everyone, for your programs, projects, events, and activities, and any other thing you're doing. However you have designed your ministry, your church model, that you create scorecards for everyone so they know that they're going to be held accountable for the work they do because you're going to monitor and manage their performance. You want to create objectives that are quantifiable and measurable. Create report cards regularly and review them with each individual. So your objectives, we're going to accomplish this, and here's the person in charge, and here's the time, and here's what we're going to do. And you want to make sure that you can quantify them and that you can measure them. So you ought to be able to count them and measure what you count. Now, let me ask you a question. Why should you report performance? You know, the question comes, how are your ministry leaders to know when or how to adjust their efforts if they don't have a clear picture of how your church or a particular ministry in your church is performing? You have to let people know when you told them you're going to measure it, you assigned a duty, and you monitor their performance, how often are you going to report? And basically, here's a truth. If you wish to empower your leaders and volunteers, then make them knowledgeable about the results of their efforts. Share the results. Report it. Now, how you do that in your church may be through a bulletin or through an email or put in a church newsletter, but everybody, you may do it publicly in small groups or with the team and the project or the program, the event or activity, that you're going to make them knowledgeable about how they did. When I played baseball, I kept up with my batting average. I kept up with how many games I won and lost. I kept up with how many guys I struck out, how many strikes and how many balls I threw. I kept up with how many guys got on base, how many runs they scored on me. I kept up with that stuff because I wanted to know how I was doing, and I knew if I performed better with, say, my strike to ball ratio, and this is Little League and high school, that I knew that if I struck out more guys or reduced the number of hits gotten off of me, that we might win more ball games. We measured everything in an effort to end up with a trophy in our hands at the end of the season. Consider reporting on the results weekly or monthly, quarterly. biannually, bi-monthly, annually, or perhaps by the event or project or activity. The more you report and the shorter time you give people to get tasks done, the better turbo driving you'll probably do of your ministry and developing a culture where getting results is king and not just going through the motions. It is just my thought with this, but there was a book written a number of years ago by Warren Bird, and someone else worked with him to write it, called The Other 80%. In it, they did research that showed that 20% of the people in our churches are doing 80% or more of the work. And part of the reason is we haven't created a culture where people are wanting to be involved in it, and it's much deeper than just what we're talking about today. But when you have people who want to win souls and make disciples, they want their life to have significant impact, then you've got to make certain, if you know they want to improve and you want to turbo drive your ministry, then report to them frequently enough and require more of them so that people see the value of what you're doing and will invest themselves in it, commit to what you're doing. Don't just go through the motions. Going through the motions, you get done with it and think, what was the purpose of that exercise? Nothing changed. And so if you want change, if you want impact for eternity, if you want lives to be affected, then measure the right things and stop measuring, activity and start measuring achievement. And that means you've got to know what you're measuring. Now, I want to give this to you, and this is at the close of this. I would tell you to prepare proactively to help the underachievers and decide the pathway forward. And so in doing so, you know that you're going to have people who you give a task to, and then they don't hit the task. Well, you need to do things up front. When you assign the task and you're very clear about it, what's the penalty or what's going to happen if they don't accomplish their task? You say, well, church is a volunteer organization. These people don't have to be there. You can hold the ones that are paid, and maybe those who are volunteer and higher up in your organization, that they would be removed from their position. But how are you going to motivate it? Well, it comes back to you're making disciples, and disciples who will take up their cross, die to themselves, and follow Christ. But what are you going to do with people who don't regularly meet their target, their goals that you've set? They don't carry out their objective. They just fail at it. Are you going to just let it go? You've got to decide a pathway forward. What's going to be the reward, award, and what is going to happen if they don't meet it? In the business world, you can fire people. You can demote them. Well, in ministry, you can do the same thing. He said, well, they're not making their income doing this. But if you don't require a certain standard of performance with them, and they don't consider the kingdom work that you're doing important enough, you've got work to do on the character and in the thinking of that person. And so as you go through this, piece this together with the other things we're teaching you so that you can see your ministry move to the next level. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, a ministry design coach. Here are our 2 websites and my email address, and you can reach me at either one of these phone numbers. We'll be happy to help you and to talk with you. Please, you can pause this, or when you finish this video, scroll down, type in the question, hit submit. It shoots it to me. We'll be happy to help you. If you need one-on-one coaching, we'll be happy to engage with you in that way as well. Thank you much. Lord bless you.